Hey RV family, keep it high, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morris, the review guy reviewing music for the love of music, and I'm back again to bring you another video. And in this one I'm going to be covering the brand new Brand of Sacrifice record entitled Lifeblood. This is the second studio-length album by the Toronto, Canada brutal death metal and deathcore band Brand of Sacrifice, coming off of the hype of their 2018 EP The Interstice, which I own, and the 2019 record God Hand, which really blew me away and showed that they had a lot of potential as a band in their genre and just had me so stoked going into the future for the band. This was one of my most anticipated records coming into this month, as the singles just proved that they were still able to up the ante even though the expectations were so high, and with each mounting single they were just surmounting all of the goals set by everyone else and showcasing this record was going to be one to not only watch for but prepare your ears for. I would say that the major issue that I had with God Hand and the Interstice was that they weren't longer. I think that God Hand didn't necessarily flesh them out in a way that gave a full front effect of what they were capable of, but here with over 40 minutes of material and 12 tracks overall, I think they did just that. Because if Brand of Sacrifice is teaching us one thing about themselves on this record, it is that they can really make sure to pack a track listing fully to make it worth it, to justify the length, to make sure it's not a boring, lull-filled, brutal record, because being vicious and being cutthroat is fantastic, but if you don't have good musicianship backing it, then you're just going to flounder all of your potential and not really texture your sound in a way that does more than just be overly heavy and overly brutal. With that being said, Brand of Sacrifice I see a lot like I did Immortal last year from Lorna Shore, which ended up being one of my favorite records released that entire year, and that is make a record that is technical, that is proficient, that is efficient, but still be brutal as all hell. This is the heaviest record that I have heard this entire year. Some of the things that this band is able to do with their breakdowns, with their riff writing, with their vocals, with their layering. The production is so fucking layered here. It is so over the top, but not in a way that makes it seem like this corny, overly heavy thing. And I really want to keep emphasizing that what Brand of Sacrifice is able to do here is far more than just pack out a track listing with breakdown after breakdown after breakdown that are played in the same format. Their brutality has merit to it, and it has dignity to it, and their technicality and strong songwriting and tight musicianship as a band sort of transcends the need to just focus solely on the heaviness. There are breakup periods, there are slower periods, there are some very atmospheric moments, there is those weird glitchy djent type embellishments, there is the really low heavy guttural vocals that feel sort of similar to slam metal. There is a lot going into this record despite it being on the surface a pretty status quo brutal death metal and deathcore record. It's what they do to sort of reinvent the formula and put themselves on the map even more so to push those boundaries that lets this record exist more as just a little blip on the radar, such as God Hand. God Hand was a very fantastic record, but it was so short that you could not feel the full extent of their capability. Packing this track listing out with some very reliable features, some very notable features that make a lot of sense, combined with the fact that it just feels like unrestrained chaos constantly, but there definitely is still a measured nature to how everything is put together here and assembled. This production is so great, it ties it all together extremely well, and despite the fact that some of these tracks can blend together, they do have enough of their own individuality to make them their own tracks, especially some of these singles. And I think it's safe to say that this record also doesn't really draw on and it doesn't bog itself down in the latter half. I would say that the deeper cuts are still very strong in their own right and still boast a lot of great songwriting. Fans of Brand of Sacrifice are definitely going to continue to enjoy this band, but I think one thing you will be appreciative of is how they've taken every little bit of their sound and sort of turned up the dial and made it more well fleshed out. For example, their breakdowns have always been overly heavy, but I will say they have sometimes left something to be desired. But on tracks like Prophecy of the Falcon, when they hit that breakdown, it has this futuristic tinge to it that seems like some intergalactic alien is just beaming down at you. and to highlight breakdowns which are very consistent throughout this record, and I think will leave some people feeling apprehensive as usual with this type of band. One thing I will say with confidence is there is a consistent wow factor with the breakdowns, where they'll hit a breakdown and you'll hear it coming, you'll hear the buildup, you'll feel that tension in your bones, but when it finally does hit one of those breakdowns and it gallops into it full throttle, there's always something done to them to just make you sit back and go like, holy shit. You can't not listen to some of these breakdowns and just your face immediately just tense up and be like, holy, that is gnarly, that is so heavy, that is just so over the top. But there's always these little embellishments they toss into the witch's cauldron to make it more interesting, to add an intrigue factor. It's not just a heavy breakdown for the sake of being a heavy breakdown. And don't think that this record is without its beautiful moments. There are some atmospheric moments, and there even is an interlude called Perfect World, which really did impress me with just how beautiful of a track this is. It's a case where an interlude makes sense. It's a case where an interlude really does bolster the theme. And speaking of theme, while we're at it, I think the loose concept of the God Hand and the references to past Brand of Sacrifice works really do interlace nicely to make it a record that feels like it's telling a story, like this is sort of a saga, like this is a trilogy. There are moments where this record blends. There are moments where these tracks can feel like they are going from one after another in a flurry and a blaze that makes it difficult to decipher. I won't lie, there are moments where you can't really figure out where one track ends and where the next begins because they start and end so heavy that it's difficult to make that out. But for the most part, this is an extremely tight record from this genre. One of those records that come around once a year or a couple times a year, and I'm so glad that the singles weren't just a flop, that they weren't just something that should be disregarded. They were definitely an indication of what this record was going to be able to put forward. And if you want a record in the brutal death metal and deathcore and brutal deathcore genre that is so heavy, so masterfully written, with a fantastic production behind it, I highly suggest this record. It's not without its flaws, but as a whole, this is an extremely tight record and one that I definitely think you should not miss. I'm going to be giving this album an 8.5 out of 10. And that is a wrap. Have you heard this new Brand of Sacrifice record, Lifeblood? If you have, let me know in the comment section below what you thought about it. I would love to discuss this record with you. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.